Hey, all right. This is Danny Danko from Northeast Leaf Magazine and the Grow Bud Yourself podcast. So happy to be a guest here on Dro TV. Check them out. I'm talking about my first time consuming cannabis and much, much more. So tune in to Dro TV, subscribe, hit the like button, and remember to enjoy cannabis at your leisure.
Welcome to My First Time, the show about your first time getting high on marijuana. I'm your host, Mike Freeman with Dro TV. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest, the one and only Danny Danko. What's happening, my friend?
Everything is good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, thanks for coming on Dro TV. You can find more of Danny. He's all over the place. Uh, all your social medias. We're just going to have all the links down below in your description. So give him a follow. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all that good stuff. So, Danny, thanks again. Please let everybody know where you're located and a little bit about what you got going on in the cannabis community right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm located right now in Brooklyn, New York City. I've been here a couple of decades, uh, doing a magazine called Northeast Leaf Magazine. We're celebrating 2 years of that magazine, and I've got a podcast called Grow Bud Yourself, basically for beginner and intermediate cannabis growers. And oh, I got a siren out here. Sorry to anyone
No
who's
worries.
driving in their car, but yeah, prior to that, I had worked at High Times Magazine for about 18 years. I was the senior cultivation editor over there. Had a podcast called Free Weed from Danny Danko since 2011. Did the top 10 strains of the year since 2005. Created the High Times Seed Bank Hall of Fame, and basically just wrote about cultivation and strains for a number of years. I started full time there in 2002. Prior to that, I had worked at a hemp clothing company called Headcase. And then prior to that, I was just, a grower and someone who got interested pretty early on in cannabis and smoking it, growing it, a little bit of distribution as well in those
Nice.
old days. Yeah, and really just really fell in love with the plant at a fairly early age, and have just seen a lot happen in the last 30 years plus years with cannabis, culminating in hopefully being able to see full legalization worldwide and nationwide in the near future. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. It's certainly a wild time to be alive. Um, I'm 40 years old, so I was a mid late 90s kid growing up with the weed, and I don't think could have ever have imagined that we would be in a position where we are today. We were just talking about the city of Worcester, and I would even imagine New York City is almost like the Wild West. I've heard of like pop up shops just right on the street selling. So um, it's pretty cool to be where we're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And my first experiences, we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a bit, but my first experiences with cannabis was in the 80s. And that was really the just say no era, and uh, started becoming a little bit more political about it in the 90s. And I grew up in Boston area and was going to Boston Freedom Rally and all these events there, and sort of got involved in the political side of things, just seeing that the laws were ridiculous, and that prohibition was just such a wrong-minded way to go with cannabis and pretty much anything else, but particularly cannabis. And over the years, people were telling us all that time since way back when that, that it'll never be legal. What are you fighting for? The government won't allow it. This won't happen, that won't happen. All the naysaying. And the reality is, if people push hard enough, they can make things happen. And we've seen
Sure.
that. And it's pretty amazing how far we've come in that period of time. It's been really interesting to be around for that, from the era of prohibition to now. Basically, people not saying when, but really, I mean, not saying if it'll happen, but when it will happen.
Sure.
That's pretty exciting. and
Yeah.
gratifying, because of all the injustices that were occurring as far as people getting arrested and getting things on their record and being separated from their families, and the raids, and the dogs getting shot, and just so many incredible amount of injustices that occurred due to this fairly harmless healing flower. At the end of the day, cannabis is really a very, very benign substance, and actually a medicinally very beneficial substance. So it's really it's been incredible to see that happen. It can't happen soon enough, but at the same time, uh, I don't think we ever thought back then that things would be where they are now.
Right. And you've played a major role, at least, being a part of High Times magazine, which is where everybody, before the advent of social media, we relied on publications like High Times to get information, check out strains, the Cannabis Cup and all that stuff. So um, I would imagine you have a deeply rooted feeling for all this stuff as well.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I mean, for me particularly too, the cultivation side of things, back then we would say, overgrow the government. If we grow enough of this healing flower, there's really nothing they can do about it, and it'll drop the prices. We won't have droughts anymore. We won't have these things that sort of lead people down other pathways. And really, cannabis is an exit drug in a lot of cases. I mean, I've met thousands of people who tell me that cannabis saved their life, whether it be veterans or people with cancer, post-traumatic stress, and so many different ailments, and just in general, it's a stress reliever. And stress, as Willie Nelson says, is the biggest cause of issues in life. And if you can relieve your stress, it's medicinal, and it's a wonderful way to do it, and it's safer than sugar, alcohol, tobacco, and many, many other things that we accept readily in our society. So I do think that we have come a long way, and that cultivation side of things, the grow your own side of things, is still kind of my lane. I still push people if they're worried about corporate cannabis and this legal world and MSOs and all that. It's like, you really don't have to worry about any of that if you just have your 4x4 grow tent and you grow enough for yourself to consume throughout the year, maybe share, maybe create some edibles or topicals or whatever else you want to do, some concentrates, and you could be self-sufficient fairly easily in a very small space. And it took me a while to realize that, and I've just been pushing that pretty much all my life.
awesome. Love it. Definitely want to get into one of the books you wrote as well, because I got some questions on that. But the show is my first time, Danny. So
Right.
let's get into it. Let's talk about the first time you got high.
Yeah, well, it was out in Southborough, Massachusetts. I actually have kind of like two first times getting high. A lot of
Okay.
people have this experience where the first time they try cannabis, they don't really quite get high.
Sure.
So I was with a friend, my buddy Tom, and we went to a boarding school out in Southborough called Fay School. We were probably, I'd say 12, 13-ish or whatever it was. And this was the era of prohibition, very strict. You could get kicked out of school for paraphernalia or anything. Just a hint of cannabis would get you, kicked out. So we had to be careful. And he was kind of a deadhead kind of stoner kid from Long Island. And what we did was we smoked out of a snowbank.
Okay.
Oddly enough, we didn't have papers, we didn't have a bowl, we didn't have a bong, we had nothing. So he basically like poked a hole. We were in Massachusetts, it was the winter time, and there was big snowbanks, pushed up against the back of, I think we were behind a pizza shop, and there was a big snowbank there, and he basically like kind of poked a hole in the snowbank, and then poked kind of another hole that we could take hits out of, put a little bud inside the snowbank, lit it up, and took a hit. And so did I. And I was kind of inspired at the time. We were listening to a lot of Bob Marley and Grateful Dead, and it was intriguing to me. I wasn't really big into the whole alcohol situation, and I just wanted to try. It was like something that it was like the era of Kaya, excuse me while I light my spliff. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I think, this might be something interesting, and smoked out of the snowbank, which we did. And, I got the taste of it and I got that, feeling, but I didn't really get much of a buzz that time.
Okay.
And then maybe a week or two later, he had an older brother who lived in the Boston area. I think he was in college at Northeastern. We took a break from school, went to see his brother, and it was typical, like lava lamps and black light posters and stuff. It was like a real
Nice.
like hippie apartment there on Mass
Yes.
Ave. And what he did was he rolled a joint for each of us, for his little brother, for myself, and for himself.
Wow.
And we each just smoked our own joint. And that time I got really high. That second time, I mean, almost to the point of nausea.
Okay.
Um, but at the same time, once the nausea wore off, I was like, oh, this is nice. I like this. And pretty much, that was it. After that, I was very much dedicated to trying to find cannabis. This was, you could only get basically Mexican with seeds in it,
Sure.
brickweed. At that time, we're talking probably 86 or so, 87. And then little by little, you started seeing seedless pot. And then a friend of mine later, I think first year of college, maybe 1990, my buddy John showed me a little closet that he had with a light that he had, retrofitted to grow. He had his cannabis plants in there, and he had pumpkin plants and stuff. And that was really the turning point for me, seeing that you could do this in a small space. I mean, we were under the impression that you needed, acres and acres in South America to
Right.
produce cannabis. And once I realized, he was growing, a QP or so, quarter pound, in a closet every 3 months or so. And to me, that was like mind blowing that you could do that. And the quality of it was so much better than anything you could get, um, in the traditional marketplace. And so that really set me off on the mission of like, well, now I got to go to Amsterdam. I got to get seeds. I got to figure out, what lights work for this. Um, and that really kind of set me on that mission. So once I graduated college, moved to New York City, uh, set up a grow, and that was it. I just, and that grow grew over time into a larger and larger grows. you know, surviving in New York City uh, isn't always easy, and all the supplemental income was very helpful, but also really stressful. I mean, I gotta give people that side of things too.
Sure.
There was a lot of fear. It's tough, meeting new people. You become sort of antisocial because you're lying to people. From the first moment you meet them, they ask you, "What do you do?" And so there's that side of things too. And I'm just so happy that now I'm seeing people do this legally and be able to make a living and provide for their families without that looking over your shoulder. I might get busted, I might get robbed. That fear, it's mind altering. It really does actually change your personality in some ways. And it takes a while to come out of that. And actually, even now, I mean, it's legal here in New York. You can smoke outside. And I will still actually, like, if I see a cop or something, like, up to, instinctively kind of hide, whatever I'm doing. And then I'm like, you know what? It comes to that realization, it's legal. Wherever you can smoke a cigarette, you can smoke pot. So it's uh it's a mindset that I'm glad that younger people aren't going to have to grow up with. I remember that first time in Amsterdam, uh being able to just light up in a coffee shop, order cannabis off of a menu, uh roll a spliff in peace, and fire it up and have a cup of coffee and look out the window at the bikes going by and go and visit a museum. It all just felt so civilized and so
Right.
perfect, and so, and people talk about how pot makes you paranoid, and at the time, it did. You felt like it did make you paranoid, but I think it was the laws that made you paranoid
Sure.
and
Of
not the
course.
pot.
Yeah.
It's the fear, and without that, it's just a wonderful, amazing experience. And even the price of pot. I mean, we were paying $400 or $500 an ounce in those days, and all that price is in the risk. It doesn't cost that much to produce cannabis. It's a flower that you grow. So, that's another kind of light bulb moment that I had where I was like, I can make this for pennies. What am I spending all this money for? You know?
Yeah.
And it's a higher quality. You know what went into it. You know what strain it is, if it's the one for you, if it's what you like, and uh, on top of that, it's fun too. It's a wonderful hobby. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, literally the fruits of your labor. You
Yeah.
watch it grow and you consume it, and which I would, you know, spiritually probably does something for you. You know, maybe is a stronger connection with it.
Oh, I've definitely heard from medical patients who I mean, they're like, I grow my medicine. I don't go to the pharmacy. I don't need a doctor's note. I grow my medicine, and part of the healing process is that caring for these plants that are then in turn going to care for me. It's like this symbiotic relationship with this amazing plant that's here to help us. You know, it's clearly meant for us in some type of way to consume and heal us and help us. And so it is, you know, there's definitely that side of things, and that stigma that we've been living with for the last 80 years or so isn't that old. I mean, I try to explain to people like, yeah, it's in our lifetime, in our parents' lifetime, it existed, but it didn't exist in our great grandparents' lifetime.
Right.
It wasn't illegal, and it wasn't, you know, people didn't look at it the same way. They would boil tea out of cannabis, and these hash making traditions go back thousands of years in countries like Lebanon or Morocco, Afghanistan. I mean, there's thousands of years of tradition handed down from generation to generation of how to make hash. And then in Southeast Asia, how to grow these plants and boil them for tea and consume them for this purpose or that purpose. And uh, you know, we're stuck in our vision of how things are, but uh, in the longer, bigger picture, it's really, it hasn't been that long that
Right.
there's been this stigma, and hopefully the stigma goes away very soon. And it's fading, but it's still there. You know, I mean, it's still tough for people in some places where it's not legal, or where, you know, some places you can still get the death penalty. I mean, it's mind-boggling that you could go to Indonesia or somewhere and actually, you know, get thrown in jail or have death, you know, the death penalty for, or 25 years in prison for possession of cannabis. It's insanity, you know, it's
Yeah.
just mind-boggling.
Um, is there any place you've been to around the world that you can say this was the craziest grow I've ever seen? I know you know, soldiers would report in Afghanistan, they would just see, you know, marijuana plants growing all over the place. Is there a place that you can say, man, I didn't think these people or this location, or I didn't think I'd expect to see this here? Is there something you could think of off the top of your head?
I mean, there's a lot I can think of. I mean, going to Vancouver Island and or Northern California, places where, you know, there's already been generations of people who've passed it on to their kids and their kids to their kids, and the locations where people chose to grow during Prohibition in some cases, you know, very interesting. Seeing greenhouses in Maine or in Canada where people are growing year round because they're able to heat up the greenhouse, and they have light deprivation and light supplementation techniques that they use. That's pretty wild. Of course, you know, Spain and Amsterdam. And when I was at High Times, we would get pictures from soldiers in Afghanistan, Iraq, even Iraq, where there was cannabis growing. I mean, and in Afghanistan, acres and acres and I mean, miles of cannabis growing as far as the eye could see. And their instructions were not to, you know, even engage or burn it or take it down or anything. They weren't, that wasn't their purpose for being there. So, you know, they'd just take pictures and leave it alone, and that would become the hash that would basically make its way into Europe and beyond. So yeah, I mean, there you know, cannabis, it's, they call it a weed for a reason. It wants to grow, and so if
Right.
you're a cultivator, you just want to give it the right conditions, the right environment, temperature, humidity. But other than that, the plant, you can almost watch it grow. It's very resilient, and it adapts to so many environments, and you know, the tops of mountains and the deepest valleys, and uh basically grows anywhere. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. definitely amazing. And like Mother Nature, it uses the least amount of resources to grow and reach its full potential.
Yeah, and can be used to pull, toxins out of soil too. I mean, it's actually helpful in many cases. I mean, people use hemp, and, mushrooms as well to detoxify soil that's been, uh, somehow damaged. So, we really need to understand and look back to the old days and understand, um, how, the soil food web and nature works and mimic that. It's really important for us, for the survival of us as a species and the planet to stop using so many chemicals and so much pesticide and all these things that they work in the short run, but in the long run actually end up destroying everything.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, I want to quickly mention food forest abundance. Food forest abundance is a great way to create your own self sustaining food forest and naturally occurring ecosystem that's commonly found in nature, but designed specifically for you. Through multiple layers of trees, shrubs, herbs, vines, rhizomes, mushrooms, and perennial vegetables, you can become your own supply chain without the typical maintenance required of a garden. From small spaces to large areas, both urban and suburban, Food Forest Abundance wants us to get back to our roots in nature by engaging with our food production in a meaningful way. For more information, click on the link in the description below and start your journey today. Okay, let's get back to today's episode. Now, you said you started your first grow in the early 90s and you wrote a book, um, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana, which came out 2018.
Yeah.
Um, So I would imagine you had thought about, since you were a writer for so many years as well, I would imagine you thought about writing this book many years before. Um, was it just that was the right time, or was it? Uh, how did the book come about, and how's the sales of the book now? Because more now that more states are increasing legalization, I would imagine that's a useful resource for somebody looking to grow.
Yeah, I mean, the book was, it came about because the laws were changing and home grow was becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And for me, I had grown up reading Ed Rosenthal and Jorge Cervantes and all these books, and they were amazing and they taught me so much, but they felt like textbooks. They were like really dense with information and almost overwhelming in some cases where you really just want to get started, but you have like, it's like taking a college course in some cases. And I thought that there needed to be something just for people just as an entry level thing. If a grandma or someone just wanted to grow their own plants and maybe do 6 or 12 plants in a tent, they didn't necessarily need a full textbook worth of information. And I was reading a lot of kids' book with my son at the time as well. And I kind of, I saw the illustrations and I saw, the way sentences were put together to allow people to understand basic concepts and things. And so I really kind of, I don't want to say I designed it as a kid's book, but I did design it so that it would be understood and it could be translated and wouldn't be a tough read for anybody, like the way that those textbooks seem like to me, growing
Right.
up. And but you still need those books as well. I mean, that's all information that's very important, but this was kind of an entry level thing just to get people into it and then get started because there's really no you're not going to learn anything until you plant a seed and see the plant grow and nourish it and try to keep it alive and until it flowers and produces buds. But some of those books could be daunting and intimidating, so that was the idea for the book. The book's been selling great. I mean, the pandemic has been awful, but it has been great for the book sales because so many people were just stuck in their homes. And the supply chains got funny with cannabis as well as everything else. And a lot of people, I think, got the idea, hey, I can set up a 4x4 tent in my house. It doesn't even have to, I don't even have to give up a closet or a bedroom or anything. And I can actually produce something in this fairly small space with fairly little amount of electricity and all of that. And be self-sufficient. I mean, be able to produce enough cannabis that I never have to pay for it again. You know,
Right.
it's like pennies to the dollar when you create it. And like I said, it's going to be in many cases a better quality product, and you know everything that went into it. I mean, whether it be overfeeding or pesticide or any of that, you know everything. You did it all. So that was the key to that. It was just to get more people interested in getting started. And yeah, it's been selling great, and it's been a pleasure just to hear from people that it helped them. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's the most inspiring thing, is that you know we all had that idea of overgrow, but it actually happened. It really did, and like more and more people are realizing, you know, especially with cannabis now being grown in 100,000 square foot warehouses. If there's one thing I've learned from all the grows I've visited, is that the small batch home grow is always going to be better than the massive
Sure.
operations that people put together with the machines and all of that. So uh that's been great.
Awesome. I have a friend who is big into permaculture. He teaches and designs blueprints and food forests if you want to build your own garden. And the biggest thing people always say is, "Oh, it's not easy to grow a garden." And he always says, "We can thank the cannabis industry for showing people how easy you can grow something in your own house." I mean, so many people now, they've turned spare bedrooms into growing microgreens and all kinds of herbs and spices indoors. Um, and he always talks about how we have the cannabis industry to thank for all that. Our knowledge of growing indoors. So, how did you come to start working for High Times, Danny?
Yeah, I mean it's a good that's a good story too. It's a pretty long one, but I was with a hemp clothing company called Headcase, and ultimately I had only taken that job as a kind of a cover job, something to tell my girlfriend's parents at the time.
Sure.
I'm a shipping manager at a clothing company, and then little by little, we were the only two companies on the East Coast that were even cannabis related at the time, at least legally. So I got to know, we were an advertiser in High Times. I got to know some of the people over there. They really enjoyed the cannabis that I was able to bring to the table as well. So I was on the softball team in the late 90s, the High Times bong hitters. And then when
Nice.
a job opened up, they I they pulled me right in. Uh, and I started off literally just answering the phone, breaking down boxes, whatever I could do. I just wanted to get my foot in the door, because I love the brand and I love the company and what they were doing and the mission that they were on. And little by little, what's funny is the grow that I had at the time started getting smaller and smaller, and the job got bigger and bigger. And what was a kind of a cover job became my real job. And then I was started traveling so much that I couldn't grow as much at home.
Right.
And once I started making a name for myself, then it became a little even more sort of dangerous to do that. And
Sure.
it all happened sort of organically in a funny way, but I did then start visiting other people's grows and writing about them and writing about the strains and the different techniques, and going to Northern California during harvest time, and going to Spain and Amsterdam and Canada and all these different kind of hubs of cannabis production, and seeing all the different ways people were doing hydroponics, soil, living soil, organic, veganic, all the different things that people were doing, and writing about it. And I think that really gave me an education in being able to tell others about all these different things, because there's no one perfect way to do it. I mean, it's so strain specific too. That's the other thing, is that different strains want different environments and flower at different rates, and some are heavy feeders and some are light feeders. So there's the deeper you get, the more you learn.
Sure.
And for me, that experience just happened. I had a deadline every month. I had to write something every month, and so there wasn't like some big huge mission, except just in general, of course. But at the end of the day, it was like, this is my job, and it's an amazing job, and I get to travel and meet all these people and experience all these different um, cannabis cultures all over the place, in places, some places you didn't even know the language, and that that really just solidified things for me. This is a peaceful culture all over the world, and it's a loving culture. And yes, there's corporations and money people getting in and all this stuff, but behind it all is these amazing people and just a really incredible, rich uh, culture of people who just love this plant and who, they grow from the heart. They speak from the heart. They share their cannabis, and that goes a really long way. I do think that many many lives have been saved and many uh, improvements to people's health, whether it be getting off of opiates and alcohol and things that are more harmful. And it's just it's aside from family and friends, it's really the biggest thing for me is just this cause, this wonderful plant. And certainly, like I said, things changing, comes with the good and the bad, but uh hopefully the younger generations won't know the injustices and the things that we remember from the old days, and even the people that were our mentors remember from even before that. I mean,
Right.
it's just it's you know I tell people all the time, do not let your family or anybody in your life shame you for using this plant. It's an incredible healing flower. It is not a narcotic or a drug or a gateway to worse things. If anything, the gateway is because people associated cannabis with these other things, and it really never belonged in that category. That's where Amsterdam taught me too. Is like they have that separation between what they call soft drugs and hard drugs, and that was really an eye opener as well. It's like this is benign and soft, and we're going to tolerate it. But there's these other things that we need to treat differently, maybe not in a law enforcement manner, but with a treatment or something else. But these things are very different. The fact that cannabis and is a Schedule 1 drug is just outrageous with no medicinal value. I mean, that's um, clearly even people who don't consume it know that that's a falsehood.
Yeah. Criminal almost.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, and for specific reasons. I mean, reasons of keeping certain populations down and
Sure.
being able to get inside people's pockets, and there's all kinds of reasons for it. But ultimately, those are all lies, and the plant deserves to be free, and it's getting there. We're getting there.
We are. Thanks to people like yourself. So we appreciate you being an OG in this movement here. Uh Danny, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Uh Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Please let everybody know the best place that they can find more of you.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Like I said, we are ambassadors for this flower. It's not about, Danny or this one or that one. We're all ambassadors for this flower, and spreading the knowledge for people of this amazing plant that can help. But as far as me, yeah, I mean, I've got my podcast. It's Grow Bud Yourself. There's Patreon page. You can buy my book on Amazon. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Northeast Leaf Magazine, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We have leafmagazines.com. The magazine is free. You can read it online for free or pick it up anywhere in the Northeast, from Maine down to New York and New Jersey, at a dispensary or a head shop, while supplies last. But if there's none out there, you can always read it online for free. I really love doing it. We're celebrating 2 years of that, and things are changing so quickly here in the Northeast, particularly, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont just went legal with rec shops. So it's wonderful kind of to be back, focusing on the region that I grew up in and started my cannabis career in, and my first time smoking, and everything
Nice.
was all here. So it's just a pleasure to be a part of it, and to still be around to see all the amazing changes that are happening.
Excellent. And for those of you watching this on YouTube, go down there and smash the like button for Danny and leave a comment for one of the OGs here in the industry. So And also make sure you subscribe to Dro TV, because otherwise you'd miss amazing guests and interviews like this one. So thanks again, Danny. We appreciate it. And for everybody tuned in, as always, smoke them if you got them. What's up, Dro TV family? You can now stream the audio version of all these episodes on your favorite podcast player. And if you like more episodes like this, check out this playlist we put together over here for you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube. You don't want to miss more great content from Dro TV. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, smoke them if you got them.